All right, team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again from wherever in the world you might be listening to the show from. I have checked the stats lately, and it's very, very cool to see all of the different areas from which you are tuning in from. So very, very cool. Now look, it's been a little while since the last episode. I got sick for a couple of weeks, and then one thing led to another, and I got lazy basically, and so it's been a while since I have put one of these out, so apologies for that. But I thought before Christmas and before the year comes to an end, what we should do for the last episode of the year is do a little bit of a recap of some of the key points and key learnings that we've covered together as a part of this show over the last year. But before I do that, I haven't been sitting around doing nothing. I've been going around and doing some very awesome things, going to a lot of gigs here in Perth. Picked up this band t-shirt, saw Tool last night, very, very cool. Great band, see them live if you can. And before that, went to Metallica in Perth as well and picked up some very, very cool merchandise. And the reason I raised that with you is because I have learned something from those experiences and picking up those band shirts. And that learning is that when you go to a gig or you have an experience and you have a chance to mark the occasion by buying some merchandise that you enjoy and that you're going to get some use out of, do it. I never used to buy the band shirts from gigs. I used to think, what a waste of money. $70 spent on a shirt, that's really expensive. Why would I do that? And then as I got older and I thought back to those gigs that I really enjoyed and those experiences that live on in the memory, I wished I had something from that day. And that is precisely what band shirts and other merchandise from other events will give you. It gives you a tangible memory. So just a little bit of bonus material on this podcast. If you have the chance, do grab yourself a band shirt from a gig if you particularly enjoyed it. There's a little learning from the last few weeks that I'm going to share with you. Right, so in terms of recapping what we have learned this year, there's really a couple of things that I wanted to focus on. And we're going to start off with interviewing and how as a leader you need to uncover with quite a bit of effort sometimes the right people to appoint to specific roles. And the reason that I'm going to start off on this topic is because it's fresh in my mind. I've been interviewing for a couple of roles over the last few weeks. And one of the things that I was reminded of as a leader is that some of the best hiring decisions I've ever made have been in the instances where I've appointed someone who didn't nail the interview. Now, I'm not talking about a scenario where they weren't able to formulate any answers to questions or I wasn't able to ascertain their ability to do the role that we were advertising for. I'm talking about those people who perhaps didn't come across quite as confident or as polished as some other people. And in the early days, I used to be quite attracted to the polished performer. But after sitting on panels where some of those hiring decisions didn't work out the way that I'd have liked, despite a beautiful written application and a polished interview, I was reminded that it is important to really drill down as a leader, go that extra step to uncover the real personalities and the real skill sets from the candidates that you're interviewing, and to look a little bit deeper. And as I say, one of the things that really solidified that for me is the reality that sometimes the most polished people that I'd hired weren't the best performers, didn't have the best attitude. And on the flip side, some of the best hiring experiences that I've ever had, some of the best people that I've ever had working with me and for me, have been people who weren't necessarily super convincing in the interview. So there's a few little things that we can dig into here. I guess the first thing off the bat is to understand that everybody is anxious and nervous before and during an interview. I get nervous and anxious for interviews. Who doesn't, basically? So we need to understand that that's a human reality. People are going to show those symptoms and signs of nerves and nervous energy. And that might impair them from selling themselves as well as perhaps you would like them to. But your job as a leader on the interview panel is to help get the very best out of that person. So any steps you can take to make them feel comfortable, even re-prompting them on certain questions to elaborate a little bit more than they have, you should pull out all stops because you want to get the best candidate. So you need to go that extra mile. The other thing that I would suggest is don't be afraid, and this is again a learning from my own personal experience, don't be afraid to ask that person for a second interview. And if this means that, you've got multiple people that you're now having to sink time into to talk to again, be that as it may, lock it in, because it is far less inconvenient to take an extra few days to talk to candidates a second time and really solidify that decision in your mind and know that you're making the best decision. It's far more convenient or far less inconvenient to do that than it is to make the wrong hiring decision and have someone come on board that is just really not hitting the mark that you would like to have. And then you think, well, what could have been? Did we leave something lying on the table that actually would have been a lot better for us and for this organization? So do the hard yards early and make sure that you put in the extra effort to properly delve into people's skill sets and personalities and look past that initial veneer, that initial mask, I guess, that people can have up during interview. You can say anything during interview and be very, very convincing. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's substance behind it. Third thing, and this is absolutely critical, make sure that the references are rock solid. If you are hiring someone who is a leader, I would encourage you to speak with someone on the reference list that was a direct report to that person so that you can understand from that perspective how the person behaved and how the person carried themselves. In addition, speak to someone who led that person. So you want a direct report to the person that you're looking to hire and a manager that directly managed that person as well, so you can get both perspectives. If you have any difficulty in getting that person to provide you with what you need from a reference check perspective, that is a red flag straight away. Okay. And the final thing, just to cover off on this topic, pay attention to the questions that you are going to formulate to roll out during this interview. And one of the things that I think all of us should have as a mandatory question is a question around how that person manages conflict. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but we just want to get an understanding of how introspective is this person? Are they able to admit fault and open up about something that they could have done better? So one of the ones I like to use is, can you tell me about a time where you've had a conflict, a personal conflict in the workplace, and can you tell me the steps that you took to resolve it? And a big emphasis on the key part of that question is the steps that you took. I don't want to know about how you think it was somebody else's fault. I want you to tell me how you took responsibility and how you were able to be introspective and figure out, or at least have a think about, what you could have done better. Now, oftentimes, if someone is, responding with something along the lines of, I don't really have much conflict, I'm pretty easy to get along with, I can't really think of an example right now, that's a red flag for me. Everybody has had conflict at work and in their personal lives, and everybody will have at least one or two examples that stick out from their work history. So that is a red flag as well. Make sure you're on the lookout for those things, guys, and I think if you can observe those principles, you will hopefully get better hiring outcomes. Put the time in, and make sure that you are rewarded with a quality candidate as a result of putting that extra time in. Some other areas that I wanted to recap, that we've covered from the podcast episodes so far throughout the year, is kind of on the topic of recruitment again, but it's this concept of who you hire to put in a leadership position is a really, really big deal. It's not something that should be treated trivially, and it certainly is in some organizations. So if you are a manager looking to appoint someone, even to a junior leadership role, I want you to remember that it is crucial to take it really, really seriously, because when we start getting into that area of work where someone is responsible for other people, in my view, it doesn't get much more serious than that. And you want to make sure that that person is the right personality fit to do it. The skills, I think, should be handled as follows. I think before you put anybody into a leadership position, you should require them to go through some sort of mandatory leadership training course. Now, that is a kind arrangement, not only for the person that you are asking to do the job, because so often we, ask people to do leadership and we don't give them any tools or teaching on how to do it. That's more common than you would like to think. You probably already know if you're listening or watching to this podcast. So let's make sure that we equip our people for success as best as possible by giving them appropriate leadership training before we just put them into a brand new people leadership role. Let's help them to be successful, because if they're successful, we're successful as the organization that wants them to lead people for us. And then a mentoring arrangement in addition to that, a senior leader or more senior leader who that person can bounce ideas off, check in with occasionally, and have a chat about how they're going. Now, there's a couple of things in addition to that, though, that I want to cover off on. And this is probably the most important bit in this whole arena, and that is personality fit. Oftentimes reluctant leaders are good leaders. And the reluctance to lead, I was very reluctant to lead before I did my first leadership role. I was forced essentially to do the job because there was nowhere else, and I had no confidence in myself, and I thought, I'm going to be terrible at this, I'm not the right person, they'll never respect me, I don't want to do it. Lo and behold, things turned out really well. So reluctant leaders, don't discount them. It might just be a lack of confidence, but you could also argue that you should look at that reluctance to lead as a potential green flag. And why do I say that? Because if someone wants to be in charge of people and they've never done it before, that to me suggests, excuse me, that to me suggests a concerning amount of confidence. Why are you so confident? Why do you want this job? Why do you think you should be leading people? There's some valid questions. Why do you want to be in charge of people? They're valid questions. Is it because you want to nurture and develop and bring people along? Is it because you think that there is a void with respect to good leadership in your organization and you can adequately fill it? Or is it because there's something more nefarious at play? You just like being the one who tells people what to do. Make sure you dig into people's motivations from a leadership perspective, especially in those early days where someone doesn't know they're necessarily good at it, someone doesn't have the expertise or experience, that says, hey, I've done this before, I know it's me, I know I'm a good fit. Those early days, we need to really screen people carefully to assess motivations. And you might listen to that and go, well, that's a bit of a cynical view. It's born out of real world experience. I have come across numerous people who had absolutely no business being in a leadership role, and they were quite clearly in it for the wrong reasons. They liked the power, and they liked essentially being at the top of the tree and able to tell people what to do. So we want to make sure that we avoid that, because that is not what good leadership is about. It is a heck of a lot deeper than that. So give our people training, make sure they have ongoing mentorship, and make sure that before you do any of that and you're looking to scout for potential leaders inside your organization or outside, make sure that you have a good read on their motivations for wanting to be in that position. All right? And don't discount the reluctant leader. Sometimes, just because someone doesn't appear to have confidence in their ability, sometimes all that person needs is a little bit of encouragement. You might just be the person that is able to help them kickstart a really successful leadership career, and the people that they end up leading might owe you a debt of gratitude as a result. So there's another little area that I wanted to revisit from some of our earlier episodes. I think the episode on that one earlier in the year was called Leadership, It's a Big Deal, or something along those lines. Go back and have a listen if you're interested. The other really important learning from this year that we discussed together was the concept of self-optimization. Okay, so understanding that you can have all the skills, you can have all the training, you can have all the good intentions in the world, but if you redline and you burn yourself out, you are no good to the organization or anybody else because you're broken. We want to make sure that we are able to bring the very best of ourselves to work every single day. And in order to make sure that that continues to happen, we have to ensure that we're firing on all cylinders. And sometimes that means knowing when to bench yourself. Okay, you need to understand, you need to be introspective enough, you need to be self-aware enough to realize when the warning signs are popping up, the indicator on the dashboard is flashing, and you need to pull in and have a rest, recharge. Now, I'm guilty of not doing this. This is actually, in truth, only a relatively recent realization for myself, but I used to redline. I used to go until the wheels fell off. And there was a couple of experiences I had, stress-related experiences, that made me think, okay, I need to approach this differently for several reasons. Number one, my health is more important than anything. Number two, the way that I interact with people close to me outside of work is definitely impaired when I'm really stressed at work. I take it home with me. And I'm sure you guys do too. So I realized that I needed to do something very differently, because not only was it harming myself and then those deeper aspects like health and all that sort of stuff, but it was now starting to affect people that I cared about, that I was close to. And so that really drove my desire to change the way that I did things. And so now I don't redline. I make sure that I have a real focus on ensuring that I stay in that sweet spot of working hard, but not to the point or for the duration of time that's going to really impact me from a health or behavioural perspective. And that means having a much greater sense of where my limits are. How far can I push? How long can I push for before I need to dial things back and have a break? So I want you to do a little bit of deeper work and have some deeper thinking time about areas like that, introspective areas like that. How well do you know yourself? Are you really operating in the most optimized fashion? And while you think you might be doing fine and you might be, smashing it out of the park and having a great experience, the odd stressful episode here and there, turn your thinking to those in your immediate circle. How are those people experiencing you? One of the things that my wife said to me when I did eventually leave a really stressful job and start to de-stress, she said, it took you a while to come back, but the first thing I noticed was that your humor returned. You were willing to be a little bit silly again. For those that know me, I like a laugh, right? I like being silly. I like not taking things too seriously. That's how I sort of deal with stress. That's my natural personality. And when I was under that really prolonged workplace stress, she said that was one of the things she noticed, was that I was no longer particularly, lighthearted and silly. I was serious all the time. And hearing her share that perspective with me definitely was enlightening, So understand that you are not just impacting yourself. If you're not handling your stress well, you are impacting others. So very, very important to get that right. Now, there's a few, we could sort of go on for quite a while, but for the sake of time, I'm going to limit this to just one more learning recap for the year. And that is the way that we handle our conflict at work as a leader. This is very, very important. One of the real big topics that we covered this year. Do not shy away from difficult conversations. as a leader, it is crucial that you are comfortable in your ability to address poor behaviour and difficult situations. And failure to do so on your part means a fundamental failing with respect to carrying out your job. That sounds really serious, but I do firmly believe that. If you are unwilling to have difficult conversations and to address poor behaviour, you need to do two things. One, have a chat to someone or get some training to ensure that you can have those conversations, push through the discomfort and have them. Or two, you need to look for another job, not in leadership. That's harsh, but we've all seen and probably worked for people who turn a blind eye to bad behaviour who are in leadership positions. And we all understand that the people who suffer are the colleagues around that toxic person who's carrying out the bad behaviour, because now they know that the leader's not going to take care of it and they're just going to have to put up with this bad behaviour. Of course, the person being toxic and negative is now filled with confidence because they know they can do whatever they want without being pulled up for it. And what happens? Well, we have good cultures eroded and good organisations eaten out from the inside because one by one, the good employees take off and leave because they can't handle this negative culture. They can't handle this nasty environment that is allowed to persist simply because a leader was unwilling to lead and maintain the cultural health of the organisation. So understand that it's normal to not look forward to a difficult conversation. I used a word before, I said comfortable. That was probably a poor choice of words. It's not comfortable to have a conflict. It's not comfortable to have that tension between people, and you'll have to do that as a leader, of course, when you're pulling up bad behaviour. Perhaps a better word than comfortable would have been willing. Make sure you're willing as a leader to wade into battle on behalf of your organisation and your employees in an effort to preserve good culture. And despite those nasty feelings, the anxiety, the stress that might arise in advance of having a potential conflict with a bad employee, make sure you're willing to do the hard thing anyway, because that is, I think, a core foundational principle of good quality leadership. We must be willing to have difficult conversations with people who need that feedback, who need that strong pushback from us. All right. So understand the impact on culture and people and the long-term effects, your inability to retain good employees if you are unwilling to wade into battle on behalf of everybody and do the right thing. Guys, there's a recap for 2025. I'm taking a few weeks off over Christmas, going on a nice holiday. So I won't be speaking with you until early next year, probably February. But it's been a real delight to have all of you tune into the show from all over the world and to share this podcast and these topics together. And if I've helped even just a few of you, then that is justification enough for doing this show. It's a small show. I don't make any money from it. It is just a labour of love at the moment. In fact, it cost me money to make this show. So I do hope that you are getting at least something out of it and that it is genuinely having impact in a positive way on you or people that you know in your workplace. And if it has, why don't you go ahead and perhaps leave a comment on Spotify or perhaps any of the other apps that you might consume the show on to give me some feedback so that I know I'm actually having some sort of a positive impact, because you don't really know. You know, you put this stuff out there and looks like the download numbers are ticking over, but you don't really know if people are actually genuinely getting really great value because there's no feedback loop. So if you could let me know by the comments, that would be really cool. And if you're really wanting to be kind, if you could perhaps share the show with other people that you think might get value from the topics that we cover, that would also be very much appreciated. Certainly wishing all of you a happy Christmas and a great New Year's, and we will catch up again in 2026. Thanks for your loyalty this year, and I'll see you in 2026.